Today we're going to test out this creamy mushroom pasta bake recipe that I found over on one of my favorite cooking channels, Sip and Feast, and let's see how it is. You all enjoyed that last recipe test video from the Preppy Kitchen, so we're going to keep this going, and I'm going to make this creamy mushroom pasta bake that I saw over on Sip and Feast. Obviously, we're going to need some mushrooms to start. I'm going to link it down below just so you can see his recipe also and get a little more detailed, but we're going to start by quartering these mushrooms. I like to cut the very tip of the stem off. It's a little rough and fibrous, and it just cooks better if you cut those off. And yeah, then we're going to cut these up into quarters, cut probably around 2 containers worth, which I think was around a pound's worth, and we're going to throw these onto a baking sheet. We're going to roast these. They're not going to be sauteed, which was the first thing I found kind of interesting about this recipe. Once you get them all on, space them out nice and evenly so they have room to really roast and get color. I'm going to put a little olive oil in here. This is an extra virgin. I want a higher smoke point olive oil because these are going to go into an oven at 450 degrees. Make sure they're nice and coated. Get a little bit of salt on them, a little bit of pepper, and then a 450 degree oven for about 15 minutes. Right when those go in, I'm going to start cooking my pasta. It says it should take about 13 minutes to get to al dente, so I'm going to cook it for about 10-11 minutes. I really like this Albronzo Barilla pasta. I'm normally not a fan of Barilla, but look at the starch and the bronze cut on these. They're really, really good quality pasta, so if you see them in your store, check those out. And that's going to be cooking in the background. We also have this steamer pack here of chopped spinach. You need just a cooked, steamed spinach. It's easier if you just buy the frozen microwavable kind. You can do it yourself if you want, but that's really not necessary. Once you really kind of dry it off, though, you don't want it wet and leaving spinach juice all over your pasta. Chop it up a little bit and then throw it into a bowl to just drain one last little bit onto a paper towel. And we're going to finally grate 2 cloves of garlic. At that point, your mushrooms should be ready. You can see they've really browned nicely. They've cooked. They've reduced in size. I'm going to let these sit for about 5 to 10 minutes just to cool down a little bit. We're going to be mixing these with some cooler cheeses, so you don't want them to melt them right off the bat. Now we're ready to start assembling. We're going to add the pasta that we've drained into a large mixing bowl, add ricotta to it. I'm going to put the measurements down below, but you could also check Sip and Feast. That's mozzarella cheese. He used fontina, but I could not find that in my store, and he mentioned mozzarella is fine. We're going to use a little bit of parm, and then 3/4 of a cup of whole milk. The parm you use half now, half the top. I threw that spinach in there as well, and then we're going to mix that all together. Once you do that, I'm going to add a touch of nutmeg, which Sip and Feast also did. Once it's nice and mixed together, then he adds the mushrooms in at that point. I guess so you don't overwork them. Makes sense. So add them at this stage. They're nice and cool down. They won't melt all that cheese immediately, which is kind of what you're looking for. And that's what you're looking for. Nice and cohesive. We're going to throw this into a 9x13 baking dish. You really want to pile it in there nicely. You want to have it even. You want to make sure you push it out onto all the corners because you want to give this room to get nice and brown and crispy on top. And then once you get that in and you really spread it out nicely, we're going to put the rest of that Parmesan cheese, which is about 20 grams worth, over the top, and you're ready to cook this. The original recipe covers this in parchment paper and then tin foil to make sure it doesn't stick to the tin foil. I was out of parchment paper, so we just used tin foil. I tried to give it a little room in the top there so it doesn't immediately touch the pasta. But throw that into your oven 450 for about 15 minutes. As you can see, it did a fairly good job not sticking. 1 or 2 noodles got stuck to the top, but that's why you really want to put that parchment paper layer in there. It will really just save you a mess. Once you uncover it, though, put it back in for about 5 to 8 minutes, and that's what you're looking for. If you want it a little crispier, you could throw it into the broiler for a minute or 2. We're going to let this sit now for about 10 minutes to cool down before we cut into it. All baked pastas taste way better when you let them cool down. And there we go. That's the cooled down pasta, and now we're ready to taste. First impressions after diving in here, it's not overly saucy, which I like. Some baked pastas, like a baked ziti, you want a little more tomato sauce and stuff in there, but this is very kind of cohesive and a little more solid feeling, which is cool. I'm going to try to get a little bit of everything into this first bite here. A little spinach, a little mushroom, you get all the cheese, all the pasta. And this is really good. This is definitely a strong A- dish. I think it could be a little better, but that might just be on me and not using fontina, so definitely recommend this.